As this is the first joint venture between our two countries, I'm having it patched directly to the White House and Buckingham Palace.
Well, I'm sure Her Majesty will be fascinated.
We have audiovisual.
Ah, at last.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
Do you expect me to talk?
Anyway, this time we're blasting off into outer space as we discuss Moonraker. Well, not really in space. Probably the end bit of the movie happens in space, but we'll forget that later on.
We'll forget it later on.
It's James Bond in space! That should have been in the trailer. That should have been
in space.
Which is funny because in the original book had nothing to do with space at all.
Nothing at all.
It was like a submarine or a rocket or something. That was
a rocket.
Yeah.
London, I think.
Yeah, the film and the book are two very different beasts.
The book's brilliant, actually, but we'll come back to that. Who's in Moonraker, etc.? Because we haven't done that bit yet.
Anyway, as if you didn't know, the movie stars Roger Moore, Michael Lonsdale, Lois Charles, Corinne Cleary, Blanche Volek, Richard Keel, written by Christopher Wood, with a score by John Barry, and directed by Lewis Gilbert. So, what do you reckon to Moonraker?
Dave, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll happily go first.
Seeing as you've seen it like the most times now.
Well, yeah, we've postponed recording 2 or 3 times, and then we did try to record, and it was all too late, and none of us were really doing particularly well, so we
We're a bit tired and poorly.
Yeah, there is that. Becca's not been too well.
But anyway, Dave, tell us where we are in terms of production, finance, and things like that.
Production, finance, and everything like that. Okay.
And stuff and shiz.
The incredible thing about this film, I forgot to mention I don't think I mentioned finances when we covered The Spy Who Loved Me recently, but you may recall that The Man with the Golden Gun, going back a couple of films, only took 97 million worldwide, and only about 20 of that in the United States. It was a series a little bit in trouble, and then during the Spy Who Loved Me podcast, we talked about how the series, had a lot to deal with in the build up to that film. The end result was a massive success. The Spy Who Loved Me, off a budget of about 14 million, took 185-ish worldwide, with about 45 of that at the US box office. So a sizable hit. Tonight, and we'll talk about the production in a minute because British taxes and all that come into play, but the film tonight has a budget of 31 million.
Whoa.
Which is an extraordinary rise. Off that, though, it did 70 million at the US box office and it took 210 worldwide. Now, to give that some context, Superman the movie was released about 6 months before, and that took circa 300 million worldwide. Star Wars was released a couple of years before and took about 391 in its original release. So it's no longer the biggest series in the world by any means, but this is a sizable hit, and it's comfortably above what the series has been doing in recent outings.
That's why I got the image in Star Wars, because it was going to be... The next film was going to be for your eyes only, wasn't it? But then they brought forward Moonraker because of the whole Star Wars bandwagon.
Well, you may have mentioned that, actually, at the end of the Spy Who Loved Me podcast.
I did.
Can't remember now.
Continuity.
It was that long ago.
It was that long ago. We recorded it back when we were, teenagers.
We're now in our 40s.
Yeah. The Spy Who Loved Me...
I'm in a care home.
They were still... Well, he is, but he works there too.
Oh, okay.
We're not really in our 40s.
Well, I am nearly, but the Spy Who Loved Me, at the end of the film, it said, James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. So that should have been the film released in this slot.
But thanks to Star Wars, that didn't happen.
But thanks to Star Wars, things changed. And it didn't change because they had a nice ready-made book with Bond going into space, as we alluded to earlier. It's simply because it's got the word moon in its name, and they had to cash in on that. But there's a lot of things around this era that cash in. The original Battlestar Galactica, the resurrection of Star Trek, we'll come to all of that. But I'd like to hand off to Chris, see what he makes of Moonraker.
Moonraker is Bond at his most batshit, really. It's always been like the fun... I say the most fun Roger Moore Bond. I mean, it's a film where you watch growing up and it's like, cool, it's Bond in space. It's like two worlds coming together. It's like, yes, it's like he gets on the spaceship and his lasers and pew pew and all this stuff. And it's pretty like, yeah, cool. You watch it now, you go like, what the fuck were they thinking making this? But to be honest, over the past few weeks, it's actually one of the most enjoyable Roger Moore films that we've come across out of the 4 so far. It actually works a lot better than previous weeks, as much as we like mainly Spy, Love Me, and Live and Let Die. But I think this is kind of the most consistent of the Roger Moore films. It kind of sticks to a certain tone because I think it knows it's all out silly and just goes, yeah, fuck it. Just go there.
I think the thing I'd like to say before Becca sort of weighs in with her thoughts on the film is, in talking to people on social media, through our account for this podcast, people tend to talk about 3 of our podcasts more than any other. They talk about the music one. They were very, very pleased with the episode where Charlie came on. And Charlie will be on again in only 4 or 5 episodes' time when we finish with Roger Moore. They talk a lot about the On Her Majesty's Secret Service podcast, because we didn't just rave about it. We did actually break down. And I was quite proud of the fact that we broke down why we thought about why we thought it was such a great film, though. But the podcast that we've done so far that gets the most feedback is the Diamonds Are Forever podcast, because it was funny and we ripped it a new arsehole. And I think when people see us get into Moonraker, I think they assume we're going to do it again. And I have to kind of disappoint you all.
Hopefully we'll be more balanced.
I will take the piss as I go through this, but this film is absolutely nowhere near as bad as its reputation. It is a bottom half Bond film, there is no doubt. But someone only said to me today online, they said, we were talking about Moonraker and they quoted something from Spy Who Loved Me, and they said, oh yeah, well that was the good one. And I just said, yeah, well you don't know what we're going to say about either yet. But there's a serious point there. I alluded to this on the Spy Who Loved Me. The films aren't as far apart in quality as their reputations may suggest. But this has a really batshit concept, and it pushes the humour just a little bit far in places. But it's not horrendous. Becca, what do you think?
No, I can't. Well, I largely agree with both of you, but I think as much as I love Spy Who Loved Me, it's such a schizophrenic movie. Moonraker is definitely more balanced, but I tend to think that when people think of the Roger Moore era with all its silliness and its kind of campiness, they tend to think of sort of Spy Who Loved Me or Moonraker in particular. It's like Bond in space. It is batshit crazy. They're just tarring it all with the same brush. It is more balanced, so funny, has some of the best lines. Granted, most of those go to Drax, Michael Lonsdale.
Probably the best villain Roger Moore comes up with.
Definitely, or easily for sure.
Yeah,
he just has so many great lines. I really enjoy quoting them as we go on.
The only one that could have matched him would have been Zorin, and there's lots of things with the Zorin performance that's wasted opportunity.
He's amazing. Zorin is one of the amazing villains.
Yeah,
I think for me, he stands out as a top tier Bond villain, just not in the Roger Moore era, but in the whole Bond.
There are problems with that film, and there are problems with Zorin's abilities or the lack thereof.
Zorin's a bit wasted, but he's enjoyable.
But there's enormous potential.
Yeah,
there, and a great actor. Funny enough, growing up, I always thought like Drax was quite dull.
Yeah, it's a very understated performance that he gives.
That's what it is. There's a real coldness in his eyes. I like Drax. I think I'd go along with this. I mean, even if you prefer the Spy Who Loved Me, I'd be hard pushed to put Stromberg above this.
No, I would say it's because the plots are very similar. It's written by the same writer, Christopher Wood, so it's basically the same. Villain wants to create a super race either in space or underwater.
To be fair,
they're quite similar.
Drax's plan makes more sense than Stromberg's.
It does. It makes more sense.
The land and the ocean's a bit more symbiotic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
it's like, and plus also like you're assuming that like sending 2 countries at war each other would destroy everyone, whereas this one definitely will destroy everyone. And then you can land where everything's all settled.
Well, it's a lot more surgical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's kind of got half the plan already. He's creating his master race of perfect specimens, and then also you have Jaws into the mix. So
I think another reason this film suffers, I mean, most of it is its premise. It's lazy shorthand of... It's a bit... I mean, Die Another Day thoroughly deserves its reputation, but a lot of people go, oh, yeah, the one with the invisible car. Well, that's far from my biggest problem with that film. It's similar with this one. They go, oh, Bond in space. Well, yes, I agree. I think it was a stupid cash-in idea, but at the same time, it's a tiny part of the film. The plot's laid out fairly well, probably better than last week. And I think that a lot of the other big problem with the film, though, is repetition. Because you've got the same henchmen as last week, you've got more or less a flavour of the same plot as last week. It's kind of like a hybrid, because you've got... The Spy Who Loved Me basically remakes You Only Live Twice, in that it's stealing competing countries' hardware.
It's the same director as well.
This doesn't copy that bit, but it copies the bit where we stand at a safe distance, exterminate, and then do like a master race. But you've got the same...
involved, exterminate.
Yeah, you've got the same henchmen as last week. You've got, as I say, you've got the same plot. The leading lady has lots of similarities in her character, who she is.
But she's certainly better this time around.
Yeah, it's not as wooden.
I disagreed until this run, because I grew up thinking Barbara Bach, mainly because it was, Triple X and this, spy and all the rest of it, and she's really attractive, and the film is quite iconic. I totally agree now. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. Lois Chiles is so much better.
And is I mean, like, she's a very attractive lady, but she's actually believable, like, as a doctor.
Yeah, you can buy that she's a doctor and a CIA agent and a NASA-trained astronaut and one thing or another.
Yeah, or you can kind of, like, there's a... She looks intelligent, and...
She's competent, isn't she?
Yeah, she's one of the few Bond girls that can actually... That can best, or, that can meet Bond at the same level.
Yeah, she's witty, she's kind of like... she's
intelligent.
Dry. Yeah.
I think the thing I've had to do a lot is kind of drop this thinking of like my end rankings on this, because there's no doubt that I'm going to be harsh about some films that will end up ranking higher than some I was quite kind to. It's all context to expectations and everything. So I've really had to work hard to forget The Spy Who Loved Me this week. Taken on its own terms, I'm going to be relatively kind to this, but it is mental.
Bond in space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it starts with... And again, a lot of my problems with Roger Moore are really starting to show up now. Not his age. I think he looks better than he did in The Spy Who Loved Me.
He wears a lot of black in this movie as well. I don't know. But obviously, he doesn't need to lose any weight, but he looks good. He looks good.
Yeah, I think he looks pretty good in this. His hair's a bit tidier, he's a bit neater, and he's I think he's lost a little weight. So Roger Moore really looks the part in this film.
He still does look a bit old, though.
I think at this point, for me, he does start to look a little bit ancient. I mean, it gets to obviously A View to a Kill, where he is your granddad pretty much.
The next film's when he's sharing a hotel with a fellow pensioner.
But here, I think he looks the business.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference when I watched them all close together recently, the big difference is for Your Eyes Only. And I don't know if some of that's psychological as a viewer, because we've crossed into another decade, but there just seems to be a big difference between this film and the next one. But
yeah, I think the craziness of... I know we say Bond in space, and that only happens for the last third of the film, but I mean, you got something as extreme as, a space battle, and then there's, the only way is down, pretty much. You kind of got to really bring it back down to earth and have a more grounded plot, as it were. Well, so I think that's why...
The end sequence, it works exactly the same way as... like at the end of any other really Bond film. It's just that instead of guns, they put lasers in the hands.
Pew, pew.
Really, that's the only real difference.
Pretty much.
And the fact that it's in space, and then you have people floating off in space and that. But
yeah,
that's pretty much,
I mean, it's a stupid idea, but they kind of. I mean, he could have gone into space and You Only Live Twice quite easily, if you think about the way that plot unfolded. But let's row back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning. If we talk about the pre-title, I think this is a microcosm of my problems with Roger Moore. In that, I think I had a good laugh at this sequence. There's some really funny bits in it, and we'll get to them. But it's actually a pretty tense, well-made sequence.
It's quite short, isn't it? I think it's probably one of the
It's
shortest
really
pre-title
fucking
scenes in the whole
goofy
series.
humor. That kind of underscores it a little bit. It is short. You're right, Becca. It's an awful lot shorter than I think most of them around this period.
Yeah.
I think
Pretty
it starts off with basically you get like you get to see actual Moonraker the shuttle being transported and it getting stolen and whatnot. So you get that introduction. Get
Lois Lane's inside reporting for the Daily Planet.
Lois Lane.
But do you go to M? If I remember correctly, do you go to M after that and you sit in the office? Oh well, get 007, or am I just thinking of a different one film?
Yeah,
Where is he? He's on his last leg, sir.
He's there because I noticed he was on the red phone, which made me think of our bat.
He's on the bat phone.
He was on the bat phone, and then he opens the door, and Moneypenny looks like she's got a really tight perm.
Sorry,
and I just feel so harsh being hard on her because the fact is she's getting older. You know, people age, and if they're still casting her, why wouldn't she take a paycheck?
She still looks glam, though. Very glamorous.
You think so? I think she looks really strange.
We
Not
see her
her,
quite a few
not her build, her DNA, anything like that. Just the style of the era. They've
Yeah,
kind of put this really strange type.
the era that style forgot.
Oh, absolutely. And then it's a really forced joke because when you think of the last film, as much as I've got problems with The Spy Who Loved Me, this is kind of like a pale imitation because in the last film we have tell him to pull out immediately.
And this
Which is
time he's
quite
on
a
his last
funny
legs.
line. It's on his last leg. That's
It's hitting the same beats, isn't it?
Yeah, he's kind of rubbing a woman's leg.
Any higher, Mr. Bond? My ears will pop.
Which
So
I needed to
quote the
read
film
up on
as we go
female
along.
anatomy after that because I had no idea that's what happened. But it's. But
anyway, we cut to Bond, and of course he's with a lady.
Well, it is kind of similar. He's coming back from the African mission, whatever that was.
Don't know what that is.
And,
I just love how they just don't explain. Oh, he was off in Scandinavia. Oh, he was off doing that. We don't need any more than that. We don't need any more details.
Was it one of the earlier films where they mentioned a Rome affair? Or was it Live and Let Die? Oh, it was. Well done on handling the Rome affair.
Yeah, it was because he had the Roman, not the Roman, the Italian. He had a Roman. He had a toga with olive oil on him. No,
there were all these missions that are yet to mine. I'd like to know what went on. You know, what was the Rome affair? What happened?
Well, I've always kind of thought that's the books, if you know what I mean. Not the Fleming books, but the continuation ones. If you think of all the like Raymond Benson books or something like that,
yeah, they're probably
like Pierce Brosnan books, the missions we didn't see.
No. Anyway, so moving on, Bond's feeding up a woman.
He's feeling up a woman. He gets very close to like the prize, and then he gets interrupted by a gun.
Nameless villain.
And I just think his handiwork's not great, is it? Because he's missed the fact she's got a gun on her.
Yeah, he didn't spot that, so missed the trick there, Bond.
Now, what? Basically, he goes to jump off the plane, and Jaws is there, or Summer. How the hell did this?
Henchman for hire.
Well, basically, the guy comes up with a gun, assuming it's the pilot, and he goes like, "Ha, Mr. Bond, like your time is up," and he shoots the controls of the plane, and he's like got a parachute on, ready to like basically leave Bond in a crashing plane, essentially.
Yes.
So he has a bit of fight, and he thinks it's a good idea to push a man out of a plane who's got a parachute. Okay, well done, James.
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
And
then Jaws basically comes up and pushes him out of the plane himself. It's like, oh, there's Jaws. Crap.
Right, but after this, Jaws works for a completely different person, so he is totally for hire.
He is. He's like henchman for hire.
But it's also
find out later on.
The stunt work is starting to get obvious. I mean, the last few weeks, because I was watching like the original series of Star Trek, if you remember, listeners, and I was talking about how like because of the TV sizes they wouldn't even bother hiding stunt work, and then I'd come back to like a Bond film for this, where I'm quite used to the fact that it's not Roger Moore doing half of it, and then I was surprised to find he was doing a lot more than I remembered. Well, tonight that starts to fall apart. It does, because several times in this fight on the plane, which is quite short, and there's nothing too dramatic in it. It's a guy with slightly longer hair who weighs less. And when they jump out the plane, the funny thing is that, and the second thing is when they jump out the plane and he catches up with the bloke with the parachute, he immediately sticks his face right in the guy's arsehole. And I'm thinking, as tactics go, that would be quite distracting. I can see how that might work.
I think that's just unfortunate, just the way he falls. It's just, it's very difficult, I would imagine, to manoeuvre You know, I don't think he did that on purpose.
But I mean, imagine how hard it is to hit the arsehole. That's quite impressive. But yeah, so it's a strange sequence because it's a really good skydive and the camera works on it. It's really good.
It is quite impressive. It is. I think it's a
For
good
its
set
era, I
piece.
mean, a lot of this film's got a ton of back projection in it, and there doesn't appear to be that much in this sequence.
No, this one looks really
Well
good.
done.
And you got the fight between Bond and Jaws as well, which is really good.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think back at the time as well. I mean, this is still it's 79.
It's like
It
pre-green
is.
screen.
It's everything. Well, you've got green screen, but what you haven't got at this time is everything is practical or optical.
Yeah,
So
that's
you've
cool.
either got to do it in shot or you've got to do it on the film afterwards, which basically means with a Bond film you're doing it in shot. So
Yeah, a lot of
it's
in-camera
really
effects.
impressive, and funnily enough, the stunt work looks more obvious on the plane than it does when they're skydiving.
It does. That's true.
It actually kind of sells me it's Roger Moore after that, and it's a sign as well. I mean, I haven't looked at the cinematographer's a French guy. I don't know. Say I've already mentioned finances, so I won't go into it again. But when we get to the just skipping forward for a moment, when we get to M's office in a bit, that's shot in France because they shot very, very little in England. Because as I've alluded to on a previous podcast, well, taxes worldwide, but particularly in Britain at that time, were eye-watering, and there was lots of different tax breaks to go different places in the world. So this was an Anglo-French production. Hence, Drax is played by a Frenchman, and the cinematographer is French. And I have to say, this is a really good-looking film.
Yeah, it does look really good. And plus, you wouldn't know that it was shot in France as well.
But the problem is, it ends up with Jaws flapping his hands and some circus music.
This is my only problem with this sequence. I mean, obviously, you know, Jaws was for a generation this terrifying villain, and obviously the fans wrote in and said, you know, why don't you make him a good guy? And now he's just this figure of fun. You just see him flapping his hands, and you hear this ridiculous circus
Well,
music.
he
You think, oh my
he
God.
goes to bite his leg, and I'm like,
Yeah.
does he have poisonous teeth? I mean, what exactly is that?
I suppose you
How's
do
that
have
going to
major
kill
arteries.
Bond?
Yeah, I suppose you would, crack a major artery, I guess. I don't know.
Listeners, just to remind you, Chris is about to go to university to study nursing, and he wasn't aware there's major arteries in the legs. Be afraid.
That's what you're going to learn, Chris. It's okay.
I've not studied it yet.
All right, okay.
You'll be Dr. Chris by the end of it, so watch out, you know.
Well, Dr. Chris, no thank. I'm not going to be a doctor.
You'll be Nurse Chris by the end of it.
Yes,
Even better.
But yeah, anyway, no, yeah, but come on, he goes to like sort of bite his muscle. It's like that's not really.
Like your bum.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as I say, that's in a nutshell a lot of the problems I have with this film. That it's not so much a schizophrenic tone because it's kind of goofy all the way through, but even in a lot of there are a lot of scenes where tension gets undercut by it, and I think this is one of them.
It pretty much sets out the tone for the whole film, doesn't it?
As he lands into the circus tent, having survived his several thousand feet fall,
Yeah, it's amazing.
we get this strange kind of
It
like
must have been all the
Only
flappy
Bond
hands
can
he did.
survive.
we get a drum roll as a
Only Bond
silhouette
survived.
rolls into a close up of its crotch, which is bizarre, and then we cut into the most boring song in the series.
Oh.
Oh, Dame Shirley, but
The last Dame
it
Shirley
is the least forgettable song.
At least forgettable.
You'd be most forgettable.
Oh yes,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
that's what I meant. Sorry.
It actually feeds into, I mean, we'll come on to score later, it feeds into a pretty good score, but this sequence is not great, is it? And the song's not brilliant.
I must say, I don't know. I quite like this song. It's kind of like a nice, kind of relaxing ballad.
But it's grown on me over my 5
I mean, you
years.
can fall asleep to it.
Yeah, exactly. The title sequence is not that memorable, but I don't know.
mean,
I quite like Moonraker. It's
I
nice and relaxing.
struggled to remember what Moonraker theme song was when I was a kid. I was like, where's Moonraker? I can remember everyone else's, but what is Moonraker? Then I watched it and I realised, oh, that's why I couldn't remember it, because it's...
When I was growing up, I had the similar sort of problem with Few Eyes Only, but I think it's grown on me as I've got older. So,
Well, as I
yes,
say,
it's not very memorable. This one.
This has grown on me a bit, just because I have watched the film quite a lot lately.
Is it your fourth time now?
It feeds into quite a good score, because when we get to... There are several points in this film where I hear the score, and it sounds a bit like his Somewhere in Time score, which I'm really, really fond of, and is the following year. So he's actually made a pretty good score out of it, using bits of this song. But
Oh yeah, no, the score itself is amazing. I love, as you all know, well, we all love John Barry. But yeah, in terms of the song, I mean, that's your theme song. I probably like it better than you guys. And I think at the end of the film we get a disco version of it, don't we? So a bit more upbeat.
Yeah, which isn't any better, really.
Oh.
But then again, I don't really like disco music. I think it's like reggae is one of the laziest forms of music.
Disco. Just wait till we get to Few Eyes Only. That'll be disco-tastic.
Yeah, that's next week. That's next week, folks.
Yes.
Hooray. Anyway, so on to that, we go to the M scene.
I felt with this M scene, I mean, I will say now at the outset, I really hope Chris cuts Bernard Lee into the sequence that he uses to start this show. A, because I always want Bernard Lee, but B, because it's his last.
His last film.
Bernard Lee was in pre-production on... For Your Eyes Only had started filming, but then got to the M scene yet, and Bernard Lee was taken ill and died. So this is his last entry, and it's actually one of his better ones. There's a really great scene in Venice coming up later.
He really goes out on a high, doesn't he? I think.
Yeah, he does, but I do think this sequence is a bit...
He does get something to do in this one.
He does. And
But I
we
do feel-
kind of get... Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Carry on, Becca, sorry.
No, I was just going to say we kind of get not one but two kind of M and Q scenes, don't we, as well? Plus we see him here in France and then again in a monastery somewhere.
Oh, thank you for reminding me of the Q bit. Because when they cut to the office... I love Desmond Llewellyn, but he's not a particularly good actor. Because he's pacing the room and sort of looking concerned. And next time you see it, just look again. The director's obviously said to him, "You're really worried, Desmond." It's just quite funny. His concerned overacting is quite funny. But the fact that Bond walks in the room and they're straight into it, although that's quite efficient storytelling, it kind of makes it feel a bit by numbers as well.
Yeah, sort of one by number style.
There's something comforting about that, though. I mean, like, you know...
That's what I said about Spectre as well. You get to see, you know, MC, Bond getting chewed up, you know.
Oh, we love The Office. We love The Office
yeah.
and we love the MC.
That's what, it's like comfort food, as we said in previous episodes. It's seeing that again. It's the familiarity of it.
But, I mean, he's an instant expert as well. Well, no, he actually outlines what the story might be. It's not so bad. But then he's given... those darts to go on his wrist.
Wrist activity dart gun.
Which he immediately shoots into some priceless piece of art.
Because I thank you, 007.
Oh, thank you! And I don't really know what I make of this. I just think...
It's quite gadget light, really, isn't it? Apart from that...
it's not too bad, but I just think they've...
Ray gun and other things like that. It's a fairly gadget light movie.
They've crammed Q into this scene a bit.
We see him again later on, so
I'm
it's
just gutted they didn't use that grenade sort of sling things.
Oh, balls cube, bowlers 007. We'll discuss that again when we come to it later on.
But Roger looks pretty good here. And
That's a nice suit he's wearing.
And he's sent off to investigate Hugo Drax because Hugo Drax basically built the Moonraker, did he not?
Yeah, the missing shuttle was stolen, so obviously Bond's going to investigate. So he owns the Drax Corporation, obviously. But he meets pilot Corinne Dufour, played by Corinne Cleary. No, that's not her name. Played by Corinne Cleary. Sorry, excuse me.
And this is the one. For those of you who listen to James Bond radio, go back to when they review Moonraker because Chris seriously goes soppy over this character. Chris off that show, not our Chris.
Really loves her.
It's
that's a good episode.
It's just like well, she's quite attractive and stuff, but my God, what have you seen that we haven't? But
I'll leave that for you guys. I'm not going to comment.
70s, should we say?
Yeah, definitely.
She could be in Charlie's Angels.
Yes, she could.
She's got that look about her. I think she's very glamorous.
But at this point, it's all being told fairly straight, isn't it? Bond's off on an investigation. Again, the cinematography's beautiful. If you paused the film at this point, and I'd never seen it and knew nothing about it, I'd be really positive. I think at this point, they've sent him off on quite an interesting mission, and when he gets to meet Drax...
Yeah, we see him quite early on, don't we?
Yeah, the set design's lovely, and this
is when Drax had a good line of like, "Take care, Mr. Bond," so make sure that some harm comes to him.
That's a brilliant line. That's one of his many excellent lines.
Yeah, there's some speeding up on the whole dog thing and the dog food.
Oh yeah, he feeds the dog some meat, doesn't he? And there's a little bit of sped up in the film.
That. I quite like the
It kind of reminds me of that bit in Last Action Hero where he clicks his fingers and they're all like standing on top of each other.
I'm pretty sure that's where they get that from.
Probably.
Oh, hilarious. But no, I like the whole kind of... Because like with Bond, obviously he's very cultured. He knows the suits to wear. He knows the cigarettes to smoke. He knows the alcohol to drink and one thing and another. Drax is equally quite cultured. Obviously reference to like Oscar Wilde and playing
Well, the afternoon
Playing the
tea,
piano,
and
I
he
don't- yeah,
offers- he
afternoon
offers
tea,
him a
that's it.
cucumber sandwich,
Can I press you to a cucumber sandwich?
which I always thought was kind of the stuff of myth. Do people really eat cucumber sandwich? Because that strikes me as the most bland food you could possibly eat.
Well, essentially, it's like you might as well just say, "Can I have a water-based sandwich, please?"
Yeah,
But-
you
No,
just
that's
pour,
what
pour a bit of water onto the bread.
No, this is it. I must say, for my 30th birthday last year, I went to have a lovely present. We were having afternoon tea at Harrods, and it was very lovely. And it was literally for salmon and pressed cucumber, and it was typically English.
What,
So I think it's just like
we
a
thought we were
hangover.
recording with a young hottie. If you're in your 30s, we've
No,
got
I
to
know.
rethink
Sorry,
this.
past it. Sorry, lads.
No, I've heard before people go to Harrods for their lunches are rather expensive, aren't they?
It was a special birthday, so it was a one-off. We didn't do it all the time, so extreme one-off.
What? So you were treated to cucumber sandwiches?
It's not much of a treat, is it?
Well, no, it's my whole point is that it was very
It's like
typically
being treated
English.
to
So
Botox.
that was my point. That it's all typically English. So anyway, my point is that Drax is very cultured.
I wish they wouldn't stick them all in the Nehru jacket.
Is it an Nehru jacket though?
Well-
The collar looks slightly different.
Maybe it is, but it certainly evokes what Blofeld wears. And I kind of think that's always limited because the performance is
Yeah, but
quite
he wears
understated.
it so well, though.
But because the performance is quite understated, when I watched this when I was younger, it was like, oh, it's just another Bond villain and he's a bit dull.
But he wears different colour Nehru jackets throughout the film.
Okay. fair enough then.
Anyway, so yeah, next we see Dr. Goodhead.
Now Dr. Goodhead. Now this is one of the funniest things about the film for me. Not funny, haha, but funny.
A woman.
In
Your
the
powers of observation do you good, Mr. Bond.
I can't believe even 1979 they put that line in.
We got it's women's lib and all the rest of it, isn't it? So
It's just he just goes a woman, and you just think, what?
really,
Female doctor? I mean, Christ.
It is a bit
every
odd.
male in their life must have seen a female doctor at that point by then, at some point. But it was just the fact that she's always got kind of a smoky voiced kind of Lauren Bacall quality to her, actually.
that's true.
And it's very understated, and a lot of unkind critics have said that she kind of doesn't look interested. It's quite a phoned-in performance, and I have to say, when I've watched it this several times, because I've watched it 4 times in about as many weeks now. And I watched it in the build-up to the Roger Moore era, so I've seen it 5 times since about September.
Sorry, some of that was my fault.
That's all right. But it's actually a much, much better performance than I remember.
That's what I kind of like about this film. It is very much understated. I mean, you
It
haven't
is.
got the really out there kind of villain scheme, but you have it really. It's very much understated all the way through. Even though the plot is batshit crazy.
It is, but I mean, she shows him around now, and again, as much as I think this series is meant, I'm not the biggest Roger Moore fan, and everything I've said before, they take him in now to this sort of centrifuge thing to sort of generate G-forces. And apart from some bad speeding up in it, and the fact that Drax's butler seems to be like a kung fu expert.
Oh, Char. Is it Chang or Char? Whatever his name is.
Kato, basically.
It's essentially
It's a
Kato.
really good sequence, and
Played by Toshiro.
I have to say, Roger Moore is fantastic in this sequence.
Toshiro Suga, I think his name is.
He's put in a centrifuge just to give him an idea of how they train to simulate G-forces.
They
on
turn it up to 11.
Because she explains to Bond she's
Spinal
a
tap.
trained astronaut, sorry, and it goes up to about 20 G. She makes the point most people pass out at 13, was it? She said.
Yeah, and 20 Gs would be fatal.
And at 7G, there's like a safety button, decompress. And so that's good visual storytelling because you've got the.
I just want to know what's he doing in the thing anyway. Like, why does he need to be in it?
Because it's just a
Just a plot
demonstration.
device. Plot
Yeah, it's a plot
contrivance.
device, but it's also a demonstration. This is how we train our astronauts. Would you
It also
like to
shows
go?
that some harm can come to 007.
Yes. And effectively it goes up to, I don't know, 13, 15, 16G, whatever it might be. I can't remember now. Because she's called off to go and see Drax, which is a ruse just to leave him in the hands of Drax's henchmen. And it's just a good sequence in that they use some compressed air to do the sequence. That Roger Moore would press something and it would blow air in his face. So you genuinely believe he's undergoing these G-forces. And when he gets out, he looks genuinely messed up by
He
it.
really does look messed up, doesn't he?
And he doesn't overact it either.
He doesn't say anything. He's just like, oh, and struggles to get out. You think, oh, Jesus.
But normally
you know.
he'd get out and roll his eye. You know what Roger Moore can be like?
He probably like walks out, sort of does his cufflinks or something.
Yeah, shoots his cuffs and then
right,
walks
sort
off.
of straightens his tie a bit, but this time he's generally like...
He's leaning against the wall.
He's really struggling, isn't he?
Yeah. He really is. And I think it's a really good sequence. It's contrived as hell, but the whole film is.
But this scene's very tense, though. I think it's one of the most tense scenes in the whole Roger era.
I quite like the scene. I think it's, I mean, I mean, half my review is going to be sort of thinking about this film growing up and then watching this film now. Back then, I was kind of like, this was kind of one of the least memorable part of films, like kind of, yeah, okay, whatever. Now I think actually it's quite a relevant sort of scene now, because it's a rare chance for Rogers to kind of get roughed up a little bit. We get a bit more of that next week, but it's like a sign that saying, oh, Roger's like, you know, this kind of delicate flower can't really be touched, and but this time he actually shows like, actually no, I can have a little toughness in my character a little bit, I think.
No, you don't get to see that very often from Roger, do we? It's kind of more like
raised eyebrow. Well,
but when you do, he normally fluffs it. To be fair, most of the time when you start beating Roger up, it's all rolling eyes and oof, and all that kind of thing. It's like when he fights him, it's all the judo chops. It's just
judo chop.
He isn't a great actor. He's not an embarrassingly bad one either. But he's not great. But I have to say, this would be like on his show reel. If you had to show really someone what can Roger Moore do, this sequence is really good.
Yeah, it's a very tense sequence.
Absolutely.
So next he goes to pump Corin for information.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hang on, I've just realised Becca means sex. That's just rude.
Is that what Moneypenny Foot meant when in Tomorrow Never Dies?
Yeah.
You don't say.
God. Anyway.
Hang on a minute. You're suggesting that people who run MI5 and work for them are telling Bond to go out and like have sex with unsuspecting women?
No. For information.
For information.
Only for information purposes.
Not even for romance. They don't even say go out and like romance her.
Yeah, buy a dinner. Oh.
Yeah. I think I'm out from this series. Forget it.
I know. I noticed. I don't know if it's because of the DVD, the Blu-ray even. But has she got like a little tattoo on her hand? I don't know. It's nothing to do with the film, but I just happened to notice it because it was on the Blu-ray.
In my 5 viewings, I've not noticed it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. There might well be, but I haven't noticed.
Okay.
She's a very disposable character, although she does do.
She's a sacrificial lamb in the film.
She has a very grisly
does
end.
Demonstrate.
I mean,
death is kind of brutal.
Yeah, it is actually quite surprisingly brutal. I think it's one of the most brutal deaths in the series.
Yeah, it's most
definitely
memorable.
One of Roger Moore's. It's not graphic, obviously, but it's.
No, you don't see it. Yeah, she's kind of literally.
It always reminds me of Tilly Masterson, but it's far worse than that because she's ripped.
No, it's similar, isn't it, to Tilly? Yeah.
I think it's just that she's running into the woods for escape.
Yeah.
No.
Tilly Masterson, it's just like a crack to the neck and that's it.
Whereas this one, you think about it, that's actually quite a nasty way to go.
I mean, unless they literally bit a windpipe immediately.
Yeah.
No.
People have died in some pain.
Well, unless for some reason our listeners have not seen this film, obviously she's chased by a pack of dogs, which is very horrendous.
It's the very Dobermans, I think, that are.
They're eating the meat in a speeded up fashion.
Absolutely. That's skipping forward a bit, but actually, that sequence. So basically, he sleeps with her, and he ends up going to the safe in Drax's office for information. And what does he find?
Something to do with Vanini glass.
Yeah. That's going to lead him to Venice, where he meets not Helen Slater.
Not Helen Slater.
Not Helen Slater.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit like...
We don't know what her name is.
Yes, but she looks like Helen Slater.
She does a little bit.
Only
Helen Slater's clone.
So anyway, before he goes to meet not Helen Slater, he goes out hunting with Drax, which is again a totally contrived scene, but it does lead to one of Roger Moore's better lines.
What, didn't I?
Did I?
Yeah. In absence of anything, if someone said to me, "What was Roger Moore's best line in a Bond film?" and I just went, "Did I?
Did I?
They'd go, well, what? But in context...
There's an air of smugness to that. It's just
Yeah,
like...
but he doesn't deliver it as smug as I thought he would be. Basically, Drax takes him hunting, and they're shooting pheasants or whatever it is.
He's got sort of snipers all around.
And he's got a sniper up in the tree. And Bond's like, shouts pull or whatever. And he turns to shoot, and he's pointing in the wrong direction. He shoots a guy. Drax says, "You missed." And he says, "Did I?"
As a guy falls to the earth.
Aye, that's a brilliant line.
That's a brilliant scene.
But the only thing that's weird is when he first turns up, Drax says meet and introduces him to two fit women for no reason at all.
Mademoiselle Devonshire and...
Nothing to do with the scene at all. It's just...
Who are these people?
We're just going to cram it a bit more eye candy.
I think it's kind of... It's interesting.
Like, what? And that's it.
Because usually we kind of get like the plot kind of pretty much straight away. Obviously there's a monologue at the end which Drax gives us. But I think the way, obviously, the not Helen... that we see in Vanini Glass.
Oh yeah. When he goes to see not Helen Slater.
And these,
firstly, this is...
And these women that you see along the way, they turn out to be Drax's part of I Master Race, don't they? Which I think is quite clever.
You do see not Helen Slater later on. When he gets to Venice, I have to say Venice has appeared in a few Bond films now, including Casino Royale, which is within the last decade. I don't think it's ever been shot as nicely as in this film.
It looks beautiful.
It really does. It's a beautiful film. And he goes to not Helen Slater's gallery.
Please go anywhere you wish.
And she's like giving a talk, and then she sets eyes on Bond. And I don't know if it's my imagination, but Roger Moore is such a woman magnet at this point that she seems. She seems to get a little bit wet just looking at him, which I just find incredible. I mean, Bond is just irresistible at this point.
He is. That's what it's all about. But I think in the Venice scene, just before he goes into the Vanini Glass kind of shop, as it were, you can see cameos of Michael Wilson, Cubby Broccoli, and Barbara Broccoli, and also Lewis Gilbert. If you look closely enough, they're all in there.
Oh, I meant to say actually, this is the first film that Michael G. Wilson has a big role in.
Oh yeah, there's a cameo in, isn't he? It's first time.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been assistant to and those sorts of roles.
And now he's a producer.
The early 70s, but he's actually, I think, an exec producer at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, fun fact, Bond fans. Next, Gondola.
This is now. I looked at the clock, and I've been doing this since I first noticed what Die Another Day fall into the abyss after a promising start.
Into the abyss.
I just want to say the double taking pigeon happens at 41 minutes, and the film never quite recovers. Because at this point we've got a reasonably decent kind of story, and Bond is doing some investigating, and the film looks beautiful. He's shagging like it's going out of fashion, so I imagine he's on the penicillin by now.
It's all ruined by the double taking pigeon.
But he's doing really well, and then he's going along in his gondola.
Gondola, it's called.
Yes, it is in a minute. It's a gondola at this point, but it becomes a bondola when it sort of inflates so he can get up into St. Mark's Square.
Oh, dear.
They had to do 5 takes of this, and thankfully Roger Moore had 5 suits. Because he got tipped into the water 5 times. Or 4 times, and the 5th time they did it, something like that. And they get up into St. Mark's Square, and he drives this gondola through the packed crowds, and he gets the funny reaction shot from the same guy who was on the beach in The Spy Who Loved Me, because he's such a celebrity everyone would remember.
It's Victor Doljansky, his name is. I had to look it up, I couldn't remember his name.
Okay.
We deliberately left that silence for the final.
Yes, thank you. I had to look it up.
That's not being edited because it's like Becca knows his name. And then we get.
I kind of didn't want to know his name because to me, he always needs to be the drunk guy who keeps turning up.
Yeah, I won't remember it. Next week it's much more crafted.
Well, these sort of films that Lewis Gilbert does. I mean, here obviously you've got the Monorail trilogy, as he's known for. But now we also have the Victor Doljansky trilogy. So we had The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, and Few Eyes Only. So there we are. I just thought I'd mention them for you. Yeah,
this film's edited by John Glenn, who actually steps up to director next time, and fluffs this joke. Actually, when you see it in, I mean, it's not a great joke. I'm really not that fond of it, but I have to say, of all the versions of this joke of the guy like looking at his drink and vowing never to drink again until they next make a Bond film, they do fluff it in For Your Eyes Only because he kind of has to leap up to get into shot. But You suddenly go, right, well, this scene's lost the plot. This film's lost the plot now. And it was bad enough when the craft inflated and started on land.
Well, it's bad enough when the guy came out of the coffin and started throwing knives.
That's pretty bad as well. That takes
awful.
some planning. But you got really silly music over it, just like we did last week in The Spy Love Me. It's like, well, you've been telling a relatively straight story, albeit fairly humorous, and now you've put really silly music over it. But then you get the double take in Pigeon, which, of all the things that you'll hear lots of shorthand in this series of, oh, that's Bond in space, oh, that's the invisible car, oh, that's the one with...
This is the one with the double taking pigeon.
This is the one with the double taking pigeon, but it's the one that actually deserves it because it's a really stupid idea, and it's a really silly sort of rocking forward and back of the film through the camera to get the sort of pigeon to look twice. It looks terrible. It's not funny, and I don't know if it's Lewis Gilbert or Roger Moore, but for whichever the case, we've now got a series that, whilst this film is nowhere near as bad as its reputation, where it does things well, and so far the film's been doing very well, and Venice is a beautiful location shot so nicely, they're underscoring it with humour that just isn't funny.
I think it's just embedded in... I think with the way that Roger's like type of Bond is more humorous, I think they figured out that, oh, people like this kind of silly humour.
It's more slapstick, isn't it?
We'll keep on doing more of this. I mean, you will find that it's still embedded, even into a little bit in Timothy Dalton's more. It's even though his take is a heck of a lot more serious, you still find little bits of silliness in License to Kill because you still have a winking fish at the end of the film.
You even get it. You get it next week. I mean, next week we will be covering a much more serious Bond film. How good it is, we'll get to. I think we've always been fond of it, but you could almost argue, and we'll talk about this next week, as to whether we're so fond of it because it's such a reaction to this. Is it really that good, or is it just, wow, Roger Moore's doing a relatively straight Bond film? But the fact is, even the straight Bond film ends with a silly parrot and
Margaret Thatcher
joke.
Margaret Thatcher, yeah.
And it's just not funny. It's like, I think I might have said this during The Spy Who Loved Me. It's funny in the same way that the Star Wars prequels are funny. It's kind of like silly and goofy, and it's just like, well, silly and goofy is fine, but, why not go the whole hog and just put Leslie Nielsen in this?
Why not just make it like the spitting image Margaret Thatcher?
Just make it a full-on comedy. And a lot of my problems with the Roger Moore era is it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it just screams insecurity to me. It doesn't actually suggest, well, they know they're comedic and they're playing that for all it's worth. They finish off quite straight sequences quite comedically, and it's almost like, well, will this sell because he's not very good at action? Put a joke in.
Yeah,
and
make it funny.
It's such a shame.
I do wonder, right, whether, I mean, we watch these films now with a retrospective head. I wonder at the time were critics actually saying, "Oh, it's so entertaining. We love those funny moments." And that's the reason why
I think at the time it was changing by degree as well, Chris. That if you start off with a series we can all think of series like it if we thought hard enough, where they started quite straight and then they got a little bit funnier and a little bit funnier, and by their third or fourth entry or fifth entry or whatever, they don't bear much relation to the series we knew first. And I think that, I said this in the original version of this show, but this is the same series as the Spy. Not the Spy Lobby. This is the same series as From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
That's just amazing when you think about it.
It's a complete world away, isn't it?
But it hasn't changed overnight. From Russia with Love wasn't the previous film.
We're talking like 20 years of...
Yeah, 20 years ago.
We're talking like 16 years ago at this point.
Then
So the previous film had plenty of silliness in it, as did the couple before that. And Diamonds wasn't particularly straight. So of the last several films, the only really straight one has been Majesties, really. I mean, they've all had humour in them. They all do. But since You Only Live Twice, they've been going in a sillier direction. So I guess it wouldn't have been as jarring at the time, and I'm trying so hard not to keep that sort of Daniel Craig is James Bond head on, because he's the current James Bond at the time of recording. And, say, well, compared to that, this is why I was so hard on The Spy Who Loved Me, because it started off as, this is how you do a lighter Bond, and they got it so right for quite a period of time. And I just think, like, less is more sometimes. I just think
here, really.
It is that, like, all right, you've made the point you can do a lighter Bond film, and you can even do a Bond film with a guy who's not so good at action, and you've sold me on it. Live and Let Die was pretty good, and The Spy Who Loved Me had a really good start, and now you're ruining it by just going, let's try
all out goofy.
Let's try another laugh. Let's try and
the thing, though, again, I say this as a retrospective head, but the thing where Roger Moore works with his charm and his humour is with, like, someone says something that's vaguely, like, sort of funny or mildly, like, innuendo kind of thing, and Roger Moore raises an eyebrow. That's all we need. That's all we need. And, like, and Roger, like, gets out of scrapes from some ridiculous faction. That is it. That's all we need. Don't need anything more beyond that. That's fun. That's
and that is fun.
That's gone. That's campy.
Roger
that's
Moore
all we need
is a better reactor than he is an actor, in as much as, we'll see it when we get to Octopussy, and it's a really shit joke. But Magda, he's in bed with Magda, and Magda says, "I need a refill," with a drink. That is a rubbish joke, but it's done so well with his reaction of, what's she on about? Oh, and it's understated, and they don't know where to stop. And I think that's my problem with Moonraker, full stop. It's a better film than its reputation, but it takes last week, ramps it up a bit even more, and just said, well, that works, so this will really work. and it is very like Die Another Day, only in as much as Die Another Day at the time was by far the highest grossing Bond film, adjusted, for inflation.
It could be the fact that they know they're going to end up going into space with lasers and stuff like that. It could just be, let's just start ramping them up, because by the time we get to that point, it just we're kind of working.
Yeah, I think the point for me though is that this film was a massive success. It's the highest grossing Bond film until you get to Goldeneye, which is 16 years later,
and crazy, isn't it?
2 James Bonds later. And I can't be asked to count it, but it's something like 6 Bond films later. This is the highest grossing. We're not just talking adjusted, we're talking in absolute terms. None of the 80s films beat this. And it took them until Pierce Brosnan and a real sort of lack of Bond, a real sort of built-up, pent-up demand for the series to beat this.
Yeah, a 6-year gap, wasn't there?
But even after that, they went and did For Your Eyes Only next. Now, admittedly, unless they have Bond fucking fighting a meteor, how can they top this? But the fact is, you get the impression when you watch The Spy Who Loved Me. Sorry, I keep naming the wrong film. Sorry, when you watch For Your Eyes Only, apart from that very last scene with the parrot, because they just can't help themselves.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree the pre-title. You're watching a very straight Bond film, and you get the impression watching it that they've almost been a bit humbled. That they're like, we've really got to, this is ridiculous, we've got to pull this back. And they were the same after Die Another Day. And both Die Another Day and this film were to that date the highest grossing Bond film. So sometimes success isn't everything. The producers just know we can't take this any further in this direction. But, until we get to... I was surprised it was only 41 minutes, the double take, because it actually felt like we'd had, 70% of a really good film, whereas it was still in, like, Act 1.
Yeah, I always thought the double taking pigeon was halfway through, slap bang in Moonraker.
Yeah, I was really surprised that it's such a short space of time, but oh well.
Alright, so next...
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it never really recovers, as we said. But yeah, moving on.
Yeah, so next we go to Venice!
At last.
Oh no, we were in Venice. What the fuck?
You're in Venice already?
Yeah, we're in Venice already, yeah.
We stayed in Venice.
we stay in
Still
Venice!
And M turns up.
Yeah, well, did he break up?
Did
Did he break into Drax's compound where he meets all the scientists and stuff?
Yeah, he discovers all the glass vials used to contain the poison for the pods of death.
And we see like scientists go like, "Oh no, dead."
It's gas. Oh, death.
Yeah.
And he has a fight with, I don't know his name. It says his name's Char in the script, but then in the end credits he's called Chang. Toshiro Suga, basically Kato.
Sugar glass destroyed in the scene.
Yeah, most sugar glass don't ever.
And you can just see it coming again. Even its decent action gets like telegraphed, because he runs into that room to get away from him, and you just spot the amount of glass, and you go, "Wow, okay, I know what's happening here." Then
Yeah, that's where the budget went.
It's like there was only two things missing from that scene. There was like the scene where they were both frankly trying to fight each other while trying to save the value of objects they're enveloped there and they're going to break up, and the lack of character saying judo chop whatever.
I did notice that there's two things with Roger Moore apart from
Judo chop.
Firstly, he always looks, when he's posing with his gun, he always looks like, I joke about this on Twitter, he looks like he's stroking the head of an invisible Shetland pony.
He's got a hand out to the side.
Yeah, he's always got like a hand up at just about sort of chest height. And the second thing he always does is, whenever he's having a fight, he does kind of, that make those judo hands.
Judo chop.
And it's not very good. And the thing is, unfortunately, a lot of the 70s kung fu karate and that were popular. And
yeah,
so
really
it just seems to be in all of his films. And even though it's only 2 films ago for us, even then, I just think, didn't we cover this ages ago in The Man with the Golden Gun?
I think, like with the character of Bond as well, he's kind of meant to be one thing, an excellent pistol marksman, and also he's got, he's quite good with his hands. He's meant to be quite a good boxer, and he can kind of hold his own in a fist fight, as it were. But yeah, this does turn. But
Roger Moore's Bond is not a boxer, is he?
No, he's not.
It's kind of like
we said before, he's a lover, not a fighter.
Vague karate, vaguely judo, sort of done badly.
Judo chop. Sorry. That's what I love about the Austin Powers movies. It's all just literally judo chop. Makes me laugh.
But,
so anyway,
the thing is though, like, it's not Roger's style to get really physical. Like,
no, it's not.
You wouldn't find
that was more Sean.
Roger do the fight scene in From Russia with Love. It's not his thing. His thing would be like kind of like the more sort of Steven Seagal style of fighting, where I'm just gonna sort of wave my hands out a little bit and everyone just falls down. It's that kind of it's that kind of thing. He's
wafting vaguely.
Yes.
That tickles me every single time.
What, Steven Seagal or just
no, the wafting?
The wafting. I lost track.
Yeah, he doesn't fight particularly well, but the fact is, at this point, and the other thing is, the fight seems to finish on the set of Hugo.
Oh yeah,
you noticed that by the stained glass,
big stained glass windows, and then a piano. Let's play it again, Sam.
It's okay. At this point, I still don't have a major problem. It's all right, but it's already starting to run out of steam a little bit.
Just a little bit. So, anyway, on to the next scene. We see.
See Drax basically ring up his henchman hotline. Which is probably one of my greatest.
I must give a shout out here to. It's not called this anymore. It was actually the Digital Gonzo podcast, but they're now called School of Movies. They've been through like a couple of different things, and when they talked about Bond about 4 years ago, they actually did a whole sort of. It wasn't a deliberate sketch. They were just talking, and they actually said about the henchman hotline, and one of them sort of played the guy answering the phone on the henchman hotline, and it was really funny, so I just must mention it because I'm sure we'll cover some of the same ground. But this is bizarre. I mean, he's turned up with 2 different masters in one film.
It's like, who's Drax talking to on the phone? It's literally, first of all, I thought it might be Spectre, and it's some kind of, Spectre is looking over it somehow. But he's like, oh no, well, if you can get him,
I mean, do they send out CVs? This is pre-internet.
It's like, yes, hello, I need an evil henchman to do my bidding, please.
7 foot
certainly.
Tall, steel doors. Well, if you can get him, well then.
well, Mayday's not available. She's still working with that Zorin fellow. But we've got Jaws. He's available.
He's free.
Yeah, because he's. Oh, he's faced Bond before. Oh, okay. Even though he's not actually killed him.
It's attempting to explain something that you should never try to explain. It's a bit like Star Trek Enterprise trying to explain why one set of Klingons had like bumpy heads and the rest didn't.
That's a bit weird. It's kind of
Just let it go. If you want him to turn up, fine. This is a close-knit community. They've got similar contacts. Fair enough.
The thing is, though, like if they had just had it, as if he was just another henchman in his thing, you would have bought it because you would have thought, okay, well, he survived spy, so he would have like been jobless.
And he survived falling out of a plane.
So he would have like ended up being picked up, as probably hitmen or that type of fellas would do, and would have fell into another similar person's position, as a temporary henchman. And you don't need that explained. It's just a bit odd thinking that there's like some evil henchman agency there that you just ring up. You know what I mean? It's just
even if it's not an agency, the idea that like the criminal community is like close enough that you ring one of your mates.
Yeah.
Because
is he
it's a Bond film. I have to have a henchman. What are you going to use him for? It doesn't matter. I have to have a henchman.
It's a very bizarre scene. I mean, I've seen that film hundreds of times, and I completely forgot about it. As soon as it appeared, I was like, "Who is Drax on the phone to? What the hell?"
Maybe that's a question that that would have been answered in another film, maybe.
But we'll just assume that it's Dial Henchman 0800.
I mean,
at this point we get the second MC?
That's a little bit further on, I think.
Well,
I've seen Venice.
Well, he basically gets called out because he basically discovers there's all this shady going on in this building, and he takes and is it the chief of security? Is it, or is it the?
Yeah, you get Freddie Gray, the minister.
Yeah.
So
and they go like, "Oh, this is
very
bad."
As I think we mentioned last week, he is a bit of a turncoat because he's in this film and the last film under a Labour government.
Oh.
And we see him in the 80s under a Conservative government, and he's still the minister.
He switches
allegiances. Not happy about
that. No.
Nope. Oh.
Well, he's pally with Drax, he's...
Yeah.
But also, it's at this point of the film as well that we find out that Dr. Goodhead is also a CIA agent. So that's quite important as well. So not only is she a doctor, astronaut, she's also kind of equal to Bond in terms of the spy stakes.
Yeah, that bit's a bit like, oh, what, really? Like,
we never would have guessed.
It's just a bit like, okay, aren't we just repeating the Triple X thing again? Like, aren't we?
Yeah.
We are. The whole film is
it's a rehash of the spy.
If the films were literally of equal standard, you'd put last week first because this is a rehash.
Yeah, pretty much. It was written by the same writer.
Well, in its favour, it's more believable actress this time around. So. Yeah.
I'd go along with that. For years I would have disagreed with that, but having watched it this time, it is so clear. This is a better character. Well, not necessarily a better character, but it's certainly a better performance.
Yeah.
And she's used a little bit better in the in the early going, Triple X does a little bit more, but come the end, she's completely kicked aside. That's a little bit less the case here, I think.
A little bit. I mean, even when she's like, I suppose she has the kind of the thing in Egypt with the car with Jaws and that, but even like before then, she's had like two guys to help beat up Bond. It's just like, oh, okay. But in this, she just seemed very much like she's an active person, actually doing something herself.
Yeah, she has quite a physical role, doesn't she?
Yeah. Even though like she does get on the receiving end of one of
she never looks out of her depth.
No,
that's good, Dave. Well done.
But
so that sums it up what I was trying to say. Sorry.
Even though like she gets on the receiving end of one of Roger Moore's most patronising lines to a Bond lady, which is like, "Hang on, the thought that kind of occurred to me." It's like...
Well, I have to say a woman bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's
why would I get offended? I'm a bloke, but I still watch it and just go. Really?
I find it offensive.
It's a
Do you? Because I wouldn't be surprised, Becca, because I watch it and just go, really?
Yeah, I just cringe now. To be honest,
it's a bit of an odd one because it's a mixture between like, oh, I'm surprised, like a woman's a doctor, but there's also like a bit of a smile face, like, oh, right, well, I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised. Well done, you.
It's a woman.
But then
also that her name is Dr. Goodhead.
But then
it just didn't require comment.
But you got that mixed with the, like, there's a little bit of hint of like, oh, well, I look forward to banging you later on. It's that kind of weird.
I'd like it if you'd said that.
That's what he was thinking.
The irony of being a Bond fan is, I've just complained about sexism, But if Addy turned around and said, "I look forward to shagging you later," I'd have been cool with that.
That's a more very Austin Powersy kind of line.
Yeah.
So do we shag now or shag later?
Shag later. Ooh.
They never consider both.
So anyway, like in terms of the movie, so basically, Bond's under fire from Freddie Gray because they go in and discover Drax's his laboratory is actually a sham. And then
they got rid of all that sort of equipment quite quickly, really.
They did. How
And
did
it's
that?
just Drax just sat there like in a big, massive, empty room, going like, "Oh, well, I'm quite offended by this. Can't you see? I'm very busy. I'm outraged by this interruption. Right, what exactly
I
were
was
you
in the
doing,
middle of dialing
Drax?
my henchmen.
You're pretty much standing in a room with nothing in it.
And they have to go in with gas masks as well. Like, what?
It's
And to
beautiful,
go into the room, they have to dial. Oh, I don't know what it is. It's the notes from Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
It's like do do do.
Is that
Which
how
is
it
interesting,
goes?
I think. An nod to a 70s sci-fi.
Or something.
But
Yeah, I
yeah.
I can't recreate it, but
No,
This-
we know what you mean.
But this is one of the rare times there where kind of Roger Moore's Bond gets belittled a little bit. He kind of gets like, "Well, you've caused an embarrassment. How dare you, 007?"
he's cocked up.
Yeah, and he's like a bit kind of talked down to, and then the ministry walks off, and then Bond turns to him and says like, "Well, maybe not a complete waste because he grabbed a bit of equipment, like back some evidence, some physical evidence that there was something there." And M kind of like, so there was something there, right?
Better
Well,
take 3 weeks leave.
yeah, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Yeah.
So that's quite good whenever kind of M backs Bond up. I think it's good to show that he's got trust in his agents, which is really good.
We like it. I mean, he's on a beautiful. Well, it's a location, not a set. I mean, it's Venice, and it looks great. And it's the last time we see Bernard Lee, apart from a very brief bit at the end. And
It's got the other bit to do as well.
yeah, it's just a lovely way to go out. And I've loved this M, and I'm not too emotional about it. I mean, he died nearly 40 years ago, but at the same time, we're not going to get anything I like as much, probably again, in this role. So I'm really fond of this scene.
I think
really am.
when people think of M, they do tend to think. I mean, as good as Judi Dench was, and as much as I do like Ray Fiennes, I've been aching for Ray Fiennes to be involved in Bond for as long as I can remember. But as much as I like his version of M, when people think of M, they generally think of Bernard Lee, and rightly so.
Well, I think a lot of people think of Judi Dench these days just because she was M for a very long time. And she was good too. I've got no complaints. It's just, I really like Bernard Lee. And
No, I would agree.
I've said it in several episodes. We're not going to get a chance after tonight. And to be honest, a lot of what you'll have heard at the start of this episode will depend on what we can find on YouTube. But if we can find a decent Bernard Lee scene, we'll probably use it because it's the last chance we'll get.
I'm tempted to use the henchman agency scene.
Whatever
yeah,
you can find, to be quite honest. But the fact is, we are saying goodbye to a very good character tonight, and one who we've seen through 11 films and 17 years.
No.
Anyway,
Anyway, moving on.
Cue sad, emotional music.
You said music. Oh.
I was thinking about like Simon Bates' R tune then.
Does it Island Discs or something like that? But moving on, I really hate to be heartless, but Bond goes to Rio.
You bitch!
I
I actually really like the real stuff, apart from some dodgy back protection.
think this is a bit random, to be honest. I mean,
Well-
it's really nice that you do a bit of globe-trotting.
Tropping?
Globe-trotting.
I need a bit of globe-tropping.
I mean, it's kind
Sorry.
of throwaway. I mean, I think you could easily take this scene out, and he is basically thrown. He's thrown another girl to shag. Basically, he's actually like.
This is the first time I talked earlier in this series, and I've talked a few times about finding Roger Moore a little bit sleazy in this role. This is one of the archetypal examples, because when he sat in a room going, well, what do you do for hours in Rio?
Yeah.
He's
What do you do
undressing
after hours
her.
if you're doing samba?
He's already undressing her. I'm just so uncomfortable with this. It's just, don't you ever think of anything else, you sleazy bastard.
Nice.
You know, we
Manuela?
know we're fans of a series that has a leading character who's fairly highly sexed. We all know that, and we don't have a problem with it. But there are times in Roger Moore's run where I'm just like, oh, for fuck's sake, think of something else.
No.
And this is one of them. I don't like this.
No, Manuela's a bit random. She's kind of just put in purely to drive the
Do you mean random or do you mean Randy?
No, she's put in purely to drive the plot forward, as it were. So basically, she's their contact in Station VH. What does that mean? I don't know.
I couldn't work that out because normally it's like, I don't know if it's Calgary or something. It'd be
Station C, Canada. Station.
Yeah, you're Canada. Yeah, exactly.
I think this came up in JBR as well, and as far as I know, I don't think anybody figured it out. So if any of our listeners know what VH
very
means,
hot.
Probably, yeah, very hot in. I don't know.
Very hot.
Well, Roger's kind of smug in this scene, really, because like even before he's introduced to another new agent that Emma sent, he's kind of like sort of with the guy showing the room. He's like, "Oh, would you like me to give you a tour?" It's like, "Oh no, if I get lost, I'll get a taxi," and just kind of like very smug of himself, kind of like waltzing in. It's like, all right, Roger, he's just doing his job. Don't need to be like pricks for him.
I think this is a film that at this point I would be flat out slagging off if it wasn't for the amount of money they'd thrown at it, because they're in Rio, and I mean, apart from the massive, lapels and collar, he looks pretty well, and he's in a beautiful location.
Boy, don't you know it?
But it's just like they've just chucked a load of money at this.
I mean, we do get a good sequence with the parade.
It kind of harks back to like the Junkanoo and Thunderball.
Reminds you of Thunderball and stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also it's the one scene in this film where Jaws is actually menacing.
He's terrifying in this scene, I must say.
Yeah, there is a creepy element to him, even though he does get carried away, like as if he's like a clown with a bunch of other people.
Yeah, he spends the most part of this film being like a figure of fun, but I think in this scene he's genuinely terrifying.
Like
for me anyway, I was like, oh, scary.
Yeah, he's a big, massive clown walking away, where he just kind of really sort of slowly. That kind of like big, massive head, it's kind of like you don't really notice it at first. You pick it up when you rewatch it, but you kind of like it kind of comes more focused, and he starts like waltzing down the alleyway, and it's just like, oh god, you know Jaws is coming, so you know what to expect. So it is quite, scary.
I thought of Majesties when I saw this, just because when we talked about Majesties, I don't know if we claimed it was the only time, but we made a big deal of like, my God, it's a Bond film and it feels like horror.
Yes,
and I'm not saying I don't know or remember whether we said it was the only time, but certainly this is the only other time I can think of where it's the sort of sequence you might see in a horror film, and it's quite tense. It's really well done. Bond always seems to go well amongst these sort of carnival settings. He did in Thunderball 2.
Spectre 2, don't forget.
Yeah, and Spectre. And it's one of the best bits of Spectre as well. I think it's a really good sequence. Again, at this point, we've had some really silly things that I'm not comfortable with, and Roger Moore is suddenly turned into an old lech. But the film still hasn't really destroyed itself. It's okay. For a film that's put down there with Diamonds Are Forever, A View to a Kill, etc., at this point, it's still okay. It's still doing an okay job.
Yeah, still watchable for sure.
Yeah.
And then we get to the cable car scene, which is terrifying.
It's terrible and terrifying at the same time. I say terrible because it's got some of the worst back projection you'll ever see.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious.
But at the same time, they're still in a lovely location. Roger still looks the part for about the last time he ever will. And it's quite inventive. They do a good job with it.
It's got one of the good lines as well. It's like, because this is the scene where he reconnects with Holly Goodhead as well. And you kind of see Jaws and says, do you know him? It's like, no, not socially. His name's Jaws. He kills people. And you think,
not in this film.
No, he doesn't kill anybody in this film. He saves Manuela earlier. We never see her again. It's like, what?
It's the most random part. Like, if you think about like this whole scene entirely, you got this like kind of cable car scene with Jaws thinks it's a good idea to start chasing him on another cable car, as if to say, how is that going to work? You got some random bald guy headed like sort of in control of the cable car.
Who reminded me of the guy from last week. What was he called?
Where's
what's his name?
Feckish, yeah.
Feckish, yeah.
No, it wasn't Feckish though, was it?
No. What was his name?
We know who we mean though.
Yes.
The guy he swipes off the roof when he's holding on to his tie. Yeah, he reminded me of him.
And you end up with like the cable car crashing. Bond and Holly just jump off. Jaws falls in love at first sight,
Dolly.
Yeah, with Dolly, who's like with pigtails, and Q, they're like the most, the in love music score, whatever it's called. It's one that's used like all the time.
Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Does anyone know what that music's called? For anyone who's listening who can't get to the film, or
We'll look it up.
we'll have to look it up. It's really it is up there with, if you put space on film, you put the 2001 music. It's so stereotypical, and
It's probably just called Love
we
Theme or something.
don't know from here on in. We get no other explanation for why he's in love with her.
It's just
And
love at first
again,
sight.
we don't expect a deep story. He's a henchman, but we get literally nothing. And
No, she doesn't say anything. She's mute, isn't she?
she's kind of cute.
She
is
helps
kind
him.
of cute.
She helps him like
She's
sort of
super strong.
Take off the. Well, no, I shouldn't really obviously help much because he's Jaws, but she just like sort of tries to help assist take like some of the rubble off him. And he's like, "Oh, you okay?" And he's like, "Oh."
Basically, she's pigtails, very short, and a big cleavage.
We've got opposites attract.
That's kind of what she is with
imposing
glasses.
figure.
She's kind of like a cute nerd, sort of. She is really cute, but
And on holiday on her own.
I'm a little bit lost as to what the sudden love is. And how
Oh,
it's
we didn't
supposed
think
to-
so hard about it.
all
It's
of
of
it's a
interest
bit-
for Jaws.
I'm not actually.
Or maybe the fact that they fell in love, the fact that neither of them speak ever.
Well, he does.
Well, Jaws has
Well,
a
yeah,
line
yeah.
at the end
He
of the
comes
film.
out with a thought-provoking line later.
Does he?
Should I say it now?
Here's to
Well,
us.
here's to us.
Thanks, Jules. Nice to finally find out your worldview and philosophy.
Oh, can't you be happy? He's a henchman for, he's been
So,
had a few
I don't
jobs
know.
and-
I don't know how much of a problem I have with this. I mean, if we talk about tone again for a second, this is kind of consistent in that the film just goes goofy whenever it can, and if they want Jaws to be a good guy and not die, then Jaws falling in love would be what a lot of the audience would like. But at the same time, I'm confused by it. I don't know.
It's just look, Jaws is better when he's actually being scary, intimidating, and threatening.
Yes,
That's when he's more effective. Now
Yeah.
he's a cartoon, and it just felt like within 2 films he's become essentially something out of a horror film to something in a kid's cartoon, literally in the space of 2 films. And it's just
he's turned into Mr. T actually.
Mr. T? In what
Mr.
way?
Yeah,
Teeth.
Well, if you think of the Mr. T cartoon, this big, intimidating figure, and
I
he's
didn't realise
actually-
there was a Mr. T cartoon.
I'm showing my age now.
I was a big fan of the A-Team in the 80s, but I don't remember
No,
the
there was a
Mr. T
spin-off
cartoon.
Mind you, there's a spin-off cartoon now called the Mike Tyson Mysteries.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, you got to look at that for some.
Learning new things.
Absolutely, I mean, there's some incredible stuff out there. If you want to, honestly, go look up the Mike Tyson Mysteries. I think it's called.
That sounds
And
amazing. I must get on
It's
this.
basically a bit like Scooby Doo in that they seem to go
With
around
Mike
in like
Tyson.
they seem to go around in like a van solving mysteries or something.
It sounds amazing.
But it's Mike Tyson actually voicing it,
Showing his soft
and
side.
he's not an actor, so you got that kind of lisp, but kind of very flat because he's not an actor. It's really odd.
But anyway,
Okay, we'll give it a go.
But anyway, we end on this. Jaws falls in love, and then Bond starts to neck Holly Goodhead, and then they get both beaten around the head by some fake ambulance drivers. it's just like you think about wow, a lot's happened in the space of 5 minutes.
I have to say,
Yeah.
I did get a little bit of a Majesty's flashback here, because when they're lying in the ambulance, they both look like they're trying to romance him. They're basically playing the odds that this guy might be gay.
Yeah. It's like
So
Bond flashes,
we'll
flashes
both
the eyelashes.
kind of come on to him a bit and see which he goes for.
Yeah, let's see which one he goes for first.
Yeah.
But it's one again. Then there's a little bit. Bond escapes, but with one of them hanging off the back, out the car. But Holly doesn't escape, sadly, and it ends with one of them basically smacked into a post, still with his body still sticking out.
It's a British Airways.
Yeah, I was trying to think.
Yeah.
Take care of you.
I was trying to think. Is there a joke in there somewhere?
I don't know. I have no
sure.
idea. But the thing is, as well, they play some really weird music over that bit as well.
It's
Yeah.
very odd.
Yeah. So anyway, where did we get up to? We were in Rio.
So Rio. So yeah, we've got the Magnificent. Oh no. Oh yeah, because they escape. Where are we? Okay, so Bond escapes on horseback, and we get the Magnificent Seven score, don't we?
Again, I don't know who this is aimed at. Just think about it for a second, whether you like it or hate it. Who is this aimed at? The director goes, "Let's put that on there."
It's another random reference, isn't it?
They are presuming, I think, that it would be funny. So who do they think will laugh at that?
Well, it's weird. It's like, but also Roger Moore's dressed like Clint Eastwood in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
There is that too. I had to actually look up the music, even though I knew it was in hindsight, I knew it was the Magnificent Seven, but because the visual cue was so wrong, I had to look it up.
That was it. It was kind of like in.
Is it the Searchers or what? Yes.
In The Spy Who Loved Me, you had the Lawrence of Arabia reference, didn't you, as well, when the sweeping desert scene?
Yeah.
But no, this is where we get the second, or what I like to call like the second Q scene, where obviously you've got Balls Q, Bowlers 007, and the melting lasers.
yeah. Like lasers that just melt wax figures.
Yeah, they go pew pew and just melt wax heads.
Again, that's reasonable foreshadowing, but
yeah, it's all telegraphing, isn't it, pretty much? So
it is, but from this point on, the film feels just so paint by numbers, and I can understand that like not every Bond film's going to break new ground, but at this point, it's just what do we need to do? Oh well, we need to put it in space, and we need to do this, and the film kind of loses it a bit from now on. And not only that, we get to the safari suit quite soon.
Safari. I loved your tweet earlier. Safari suit in capital letters.
Yeah.
Well, this is like the last time we hear the 007 theme.
Oh yeah, because we get another boat chase that's like too long and not that impressive.
I completely forgot there was a boat chase in this film. I don't know how.
I like this boat chase. It's for me, it's kind of fun. I think what I like about it does seem to kind of come from nowhere. It felt like a little bonus thing. It's like, oh, cool, get a boat chase.
Yeah, fun fact, Bond fans. This boat chase is meant to be down the Amazon, but it's actually filmed in Florida. So, that might come in handy in a pub quiz someday.
I doubt it.
No, it won't. No.
But yeah, I like it. It's a special gadget boat, and it's got like machine guns and mines on it, and it's just like one speed.
Do we? It's a bit weird. It doesn't say now.
Well, nothing in this film is incompetent. You can look at the tone. But there were bits in Diamonds where we were going, well, that bit doesn't make sense, and that bit doesn't make sense, and my God, why didn't they do a second take of this? Which seemed to be a Guy Hamilton problem, and as much as Lewis Gilbert's sensibility definitely isn't mine, this is all really pretty competent stuff.
Yeah, at least it's consistent with what it is. It's
I think so, yeah. And more so than last week, and I'm not saying it's better than The Spy Who Loved Me, that's a conversation for another day, but yeah, it is totally consistent.
Yeah, so we get Jaws again. He turns up surprisingly on a speedboat, and then he does a comical, oh no, there's a cliff!
No! This is filmed in it.
The goofy reaction shots come into their own here, don't they?
Yeah, really.
He has a lot of goofy reaction shots in this film, doesn't he, Jaws?
Mm.
I'm surprised he didn't sort of like hit a tree and go dung. Or left standing with like a little bomb or something, and he just like he's left with like a face.
Oh, I just got a flashback to a film called Cactus Jack. Listeners, go and look it up in your own time. It's basically a live action kind of Roadrunner type film with Kirk Douglas and Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's fucking dreadful.
I have to go and see it.
It's really
I have to see this now.
Yeah, it's from about 1978, but it's all reaction shots as like trees fall over and stuff. It's really bad. But yeah, Cactus Jack. Moonraker's reminded me of one of the worst comedies I've ever seen.
Oh dear, I don't know what that says about
But having said that, a lot of the back projection's bad here. A lot of the directorial choices, I think, are bad here. But nothing's terrible. Nothing's embarrassing. Nothing here annoys me like Diamonds did. Nothing bores me like Diamonds did. And nothing is so batshit like Die Another Day. It's all a bit ill thought through, but it's okay.
By the way, guys, I've just found. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe not. But never mind. Sorry, go continue.
No, what was that?
I just think is Cactus Jack also called the villain?
It did have an alternate name, but I can't remember
I
what
think
it
I've
was.
just found it on YouTube.
Ah. I'll look it up.
Well, yeah, hang on a minute. Cactus Jack, hang on. Well, I'm going to look it up on IMDb and just it will tell. Yeah, if you search Cactus Jack, the villain is one of the things that come up. And it is basically the attempt to do like a Roadrunner stroke Wile E. Coyote type thing. Kirk Douglas, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, that's the very film.
So there you are, yeah. So
Okay.
we've got a treat for tonight, hey?
Interesting segue there.
So yeah.
I didn't expect Cactus Jack to come up tonight, admittedly.
Well, you brought him up.
So anyway, we finally make it to Drax's pyramid base, which is filmed in Tikal in Guatemala, of all places.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the... this is when Drax has his best line for me. Where essentially... this is after, like, Bond escapes the clutches of a python.
Rubber snake, quite clearly.
Yeah. And you know, which I always think of Dragnet when I'm this scene when he's
it's very much Dragnet.
and just kind of drugs it and climbs out. Where you see Jaws again, and Drax turns up and he says, "Oh, Mr. Bond, you keep eluding your my plans to find an amusing death for you." I just love that line. It's just 'cause it's so long, convoluted, and kind of meta. It's
very meta, isn't it?
I guess if you didn't worry about anything making sense, and you just cut together like a Bond film of best bits, like best opening sequence, best whatever, that line would make it. That would
It's
be
one of the best lines
yeah,
in the
definitely.
series.
I think so.
One of the best villainous lines, definitely. Yeah, you keep eluding my plans to...
Drax has really come up in my estimation. He used to rank so low. He was such a nothing character to me, but I think he's really good.
I think
he delivers it with such deadpan as well.
I think because he is so deadpan, he's kind of a dry, monotonous, and you kind of like, yeah, okay. Yeah,
well, yeah, but obviously,
imagine
watching that as like 8 or 10 years old. You wouldn't get it, would you? You'd just be like, he's boring.
Yeah.
But now, as I say, with our retrospective heads on, you can actually see how dry and witty it is.
It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
But he's fun and menacing.
Yeah.
Again, he's like the film, a little bit all over the place, but
no, this is it, and this is where we get his monologue scheme as well. Monologue scheme.
I mean,
monologue scheme.
You do still buy him as someone who believes in his aims, like creating a new, like who's just mental and believes himself as a kind of like a god figure and wants to kind of like rebuild the world in his image almost. You know, even though he is kind of spewing off like really sort of spoofy kind of lines in a really sort of funny way. Yeah, it's kind of the loose end of the plot really, because you find out he wants to kind of take this poison from a rare orchid or something and put it into these globes of death and just shoot them onto the earth and you know, so it destroys all life on planet Earth. It's all kind of effortless coming from him as well. He doesn't seem to be kind of trying, and he's just sort of knocking out the park. It's just, well, yeah, there you are. You know, I think he does a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. I do think he's one of the better villains in the series. A little bit wasted on the film to some reason. I tend to think if you swapped him with Stromberg, literally as is, you know, just swap them over, I think this film would sink without trace, and The Spy Who Loved Me would be much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Drax is a much more convincing villain.
Yeah, absolutely. This point, the film starts to kind of lose me a little bit. Not majorly, I'm not annoyed with it, but I do start to tune out a little bit. This whole getting them into space thing is kind of contrived. It's okay.
I've got. I tried to kind of plan out all the scenes, and I've got written down here, all aboard Moonraker for spacebound silliness. So I just got a little bit.
I'd love if that was a line.
I just love the
all
fact
aboard,
that
Mr. Bond.
I just love the fact that Drax just thought it was a good idea. You know what? I'm just going to keep Goodhead alive just so she can just die and get incinerated by the rocket launch.
He was waylaid by her name. He was like, well, if I
like...
keep her alive, who knows what might happen.
Yeah. So you know, obviously, like he tries to kill her and Bond in the rocket launch. They escape.
They can be assured of warmth.
Well, I've watched this, as I said, several times in the last few weeks, and on the first viewing, I was really paying attention, and I totally got what was happening and who was where and how they managed to get out of trouble and to space and everything else. And over the last several viewings, that's kind of dropped away. It's quite easy to get bored during this sequence, and when I watched it tonight, they were sort of not in space, and then they suddenly were.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
Do you know what I mean? You kind of lose interest.
Happens rather quickly. You think, oh,
It really does, and it's not that interesting. It's all very contrived, and a lot of these things at the end of these films tend to be a bit contrived, but obviously they've got to get them into space somehow.
It's very kind of rushed as well. I mean, a lot of it, as we said back earlier in the start of the episode, Bond in space, but it's only for this last third or the last half hour, really, that you actually see them in space, and you think, oh, okay, so it's quick. We've got to get them in there somehow. We've got to shoehorn it in.
I mean, really, think about it. Drax doesn't need to go to space. He could just okay, well, we'll just stay in this sort of this bunker which won't get affected by the gas, and we'll just release it into the Earth atmosphere. He doesn't need to actually go to space.
No, there's no real reason.
There is probably a lot better way without having to sort of I mean, obviously you would have to have airtight rooms with plenty of oxygen, or just a filtering system or some sort of immune drug that means that they're free available, that it won't affect them in some way. But he doesn't need to go to space.
No, he probably doesn't, but if he runs a company that creates space shuttles that are a step forward in this era, because they make a big thing of it can land like a conventional aircraft, which we've known for years, right the way back to precursoring our Star Trek series, the Enterprise, back in the 70s, then you could understand why, if he knows the technology and considers it safe, then you can at least explain it as a way as well. That's what he builds, and it gets him completely out of any margin of error.
Yeah.
It's not airtight where he is or whatever. Yeah, it's contrived to sell. They've got to get it into space. The one thing that does impress me when they do get to space, impressed is a relative term, but I saw an awful lot of space-bound film right up until I'd say about the mid-90s, where with bad compositing and matting and all the rest of it, this happened a lot in Star Trek. Nothing quite looked lit right, and it didn't quite look convincing. None of us have been in space. None of us know what it really looks like or feels like. But when you watch the original Star Wars, even the original cut, when the Millennium Falcon's being dragged into the Death Star, it all looks like it's there. It all looks real, and it all looks to scale. And films struggled to replicate that for years afterwards. So you had Star Wars in 1977 looking better than films did in 1990. And I have to say, watching Moonraker, it looks pretty decent.
Yeah, that's saying something, isn't it? When it kind of
it is. Films, I mean, it looks better than we're going to watch Star Trek later in the year, and the effects aren't terrible. But we're going to watch things in the Star Trek the motion picture that I will point out at the time that are that doesn't look so good back in the era of Star Trek. But I have to say, Moonraker does.
Yeah, you have got a nice sort of shining light across the Earth, sort of top of the Earth, as things sort of as dead bodies and debris just sort of float away towards it. There's kind of it's got a nice sort of image of things like that. I do like that. You know the shot I mean?
I know the shot where the space station reveals itself slowly out of shadow. I remember that looks really great.
Yeah, it does look really beautiful.
It's actually it is a really pretty film, and I went back to it tonight because, as I say, most space-based things looked really half-assed in this era, and they did for decades afterwards. I mean, honestly, Star Wars, the original cut, did not look dated really until you get to about the mid-90s, and now it would look really dated. But just things looking plausibly like they might be in space and aren't composited in from something else really looked impressive for years, and Moonraker does that really well. Having said that, they really paid for it because Star Wars was budgeted about 5, and I think it ran to about 8 million, and we're sat here talking about a film that was 31 million. Well, you would expect on that it might be able to match the quality, given that a lot of Star Wars is based in space and this is only 20 minutes.
Sure, you can see where the money's been spent.
I think so, yeah. But the film does lose me at this point. I couldn't give a shit.
The last kind of half hour.
I couldn't care less. I mean, it's not bad. I was expecting it to be so cheesy. I mean, when you think now, you imagine Imagine, and the thing is, on the poster to the film, he's wearing like a tux under his spacesuit, and so you always kind of picture that in your head, and it's not like that at all. But
he's got a bright yellow jumpsuit on, doesn't
it
he?
plays better than you have any right to expect it to.
No, but the ending is pretty much kind of like a mix of like The Spy Who Loved Me or even You Only Live Twice. It's basically the raid, the NASA up here, and it's kind of the raid on the villain's lair, really, isn't it?
It is, but I did think of the beginning of the sort of arcade and Space Invaders era.
Yes, that's true.
Because when he's shooting down, we'll explain that in a minute. Maybe you'd like to, Becca, but he's shooting down something at the end, and it plays very like a joystick in a video game. Yeah,
that would be the kind of point that I would make. Really, it's very much that kind of arcade era sort of starting to come through, where you see kind of video games influencing on films and things like that. It's pretty much kind of Space Invaders, as you said, Dave, pretty much.
What is it he's doing then? Because he kills Drax with the wrist shooter thing we saw in M's office with Q.
That's a brilliant scene. I think like the death of the Drax, I think is quite a scary scene because it's literally just like one-on-one, kind of like Bond and Drax in this tunnel, and he's like, "Oh, I'm very much looking forward to putting you out of my misery," sort of thing, or along those lines.
Great. I completely forgot about the line. That's another great line.
That's another great line.
That one felt a little bit more affected. That one did feel a little bit more. I've got to say,
it's very clever kind of play on words, though, I think, as well. And then you kind of.
But it's basically the same as saying "see it, some harm comes to him." Well,
it's just semantics. I just preferred the previous lines, but I have to say we've come out of. I mean, Tom Mankiewicz had some early involvement with this. It's a similar sensibility, but the lines do flow better.
Yeah, this one's a lot more clever, I think. I'd say Christopher Wood was probably known for like the was it Confessions of a Window Cleaner and kind of like British sex comedies. But I think these two scripts, well, for Moonraker and for Spy, do have the occasional witty line in them.
No, I'd go along with that. I really would. I don't think so much of the things that bothered me. Well, I think in a nutshell, when we look at Roger Moore's early era and very late Shaun, I talked about Tom Mankiewicz a lot, and a lot of it was all the lines sounded awful.
Very cheesy.
And they were really cheesy and jarring. Actually, the things that jar here tend to be more sight gags. The double-taking pigeon and stuff. The lines are actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's more kind of physical comedy and the sight gags, as it were, isn't it? They tend to be kind of the thing that drags it down.
Yeah.
Apart from a woman.
A woman.
That was just what were they thinking?
But anyway, Bond dispatches Drax. What does he go like? Desolated Mr. Bond. He goes, heartbroken Mr. Drax, and he uses the restart and shoves him out the airlock. And then also Jaws switches sides as well at this point.
Oh yeah, he kind of makes a point now, and it is kind of like, how is Drax so stupid he did not see this?
No.
Where Bond goes like, so anyone who doesn't meet your ideal of a perfect specimen.
Yeah, because it is kind of the Nazi final solution, isn't it?
Yeah. So he's like obviously looking at Jaws, and Jaws looking like, Oh.
Even Dolly as well, even though she's like blonde and obviously physically strong and everything, she's not.
Yeah, but she's very short and bespectacled.
This is it.
And it's just like it's.
Why have we got about short people? Hey.
I think she's really cute, but she's not. She's not Helen Slater. Which means she is Helen Slater.
But it's just odd how Drax did not pick this up, but then not only that, he decides, I know, I'll shout at Jaws.
Yeah, obey me.
You obey me. Which you think, oh come on, Drax, you see the clock on because well, obviously that doesn't mean you because I need you. You're my loyal manservant.
But that's the Roger
or your exception because
you're my dialect henchman.
Yeah.
That's the Roger Moore films generally. They're all slightly too long, and they all massively run out of steam in the second half.
Yeah.
Live and Let Die probably less than the rest of them, but we're now in space, and they've got to close down this plot, and they've got to sort out the various plot threads. They haven't thought them all through very well.
There's basically a massive fight, and then obviously Bond and Holly save the day. They manage to destroy the globes, and it's all tied up neatly at the end.
It is, but having said that, if I had a character who was silent for two whole films that was over 2 hours, really build up, I hope a better line would have been written for him than Here's to Us.
Yeah, they kind of, after everything's all done and dusted, they share a glass of glasses of champagne, don't they? Go, well, here's to us, and it's just like, that's your only line, really?
So how do they find their way back to Earth?
It's a throwaway line, isn't it? When Bond and Holly are heading back to Earth, they get word that the craft is stranded 100 miles away and it should be picked up safely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, they're only 100 miles away from Earth.
It's just a throwaway remark.
Very neatly tied up at the end.
I mean, I always think the fact that they're just like there to spend eternity lost in space.
I'm just imagining when they do get to her, it's like when they get to Bond and Holly, they're shagging.
And then we do have one of the greatest Bond lines ever.
They do, and it's fantastic, and we'll get to it. But I do wonder if when they get to Jaws and, like, what's she called? Dolly?
Yeah.
Dolly, yeah.
He's going down on her, and he's just caked in blood.
Oh, that's not a very nice mental image.
He's
that time of the month.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, put it this way: if it was the other way round, you just wouldn't let her anywhere near. Never mind, anyway. But I have to say, Q does come out with one of the best lines in the entire series, delivered so earnestly and so well.
Go on then. What is he doing?
Well, what it is it's one of these running things, and it's the one thing that is better than The Spy Who Loved Me. Because
I set up the line for you, Dave.
In The Spy Who Loved Me, when they find him with Triple X, he says, "Keeping the British end up," which is an okay line. It's not that great. But in
he
this
says
one,
it with a raised eyebrow. Goes, "Whoa,
it's okay, but
but
it's just not amazing. But in this one, he's naked in zero gravity, having sex with her, and they're going to patch it through to the White House and Buckingham Palace.
So you got the Queen, you got the President,
which is great. But at the same time, you think, but even by the time we get to, we've had this since The Man with the Golden Gun. That we've had Roger Moore's Bond patched through to someone important and he's shagging. Now, wouldn't you have figured out by now that let's just let him de-stress for a couple of days?
Yeah, he's going to be doing something.
He's going to be a bit busy, right?
Yeah.
But no, they cut to him with cameras floating around with several different angles. He flashes a fantastic smile, I have to say, as he switches off the camera. But
I just love the surprise look.
What is he doing? And Q isn't looking at the screen. He's looking at their position in space. And he just says, "I think he's attempting re-entry, sir."
But I just love the little double look take. He's like, oh, there's the camera on. Oh, hello.
He flashes a cheesy grin. It's quite.
He does.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, sir.
Yeah, but the thing is that's not where it ends. He actually ends with a really cheesy line. "Take me around the world just one more time."
A bad line.
Oh.
And then we cut to disco.
Disco.
Yes. Oh God.
And James Bond will return again in For Your Eyes.
Finally, at last.
This time we promise. I think I've already.
It's good fun. I enjoyed it. It's not as. It's definitely kind of more. Oh God! Anyway, I'm gonna start again.
It's more.
I really enjoyed it. It's not as schizophrenic as Spy Who Loved Me. It's definitely more consistent, and it's a good romp.
Yeah, I feel definitely, but I didn't mention this previously, but I remember watching this a few years back, and I was thinking this doesn't really hold up. You know, I always thought this is kind of like the fun one, and it didn't hold up. It held up a lot more better for me this time around. It was more consistent. Okay. It was more consistent this time around. It felt a lot more like at peace with itself. It knew exactly what it was, and it worked a lot better than in some aspects, should we say?
And it doesn't look cheap. I think in my head, I thought it was going to be this really cheap Star Wars knockoff, albeit only for the last 15-20 minutes. But the space stuff all actually looks pretty solid.
Yeah, it's a really beautifully shot film, isn't it, I think? And some of the locations like Venice and Rio look absolutely stunning.
If I was to rank best-looking Bond films, it wouldn't be at the top, but I think it would be in the top few.
Top 3?
Well...
In the top 1? No.
No. Well...
Clarifies Brian Clough.
No, I think it would be... I mean, arbitrarily, I think it's probably top 6.
Yeah, top 5 I would say, yeah.
Definitely. I think it's a really, really attractive film. And even the effects-heavy bits are done really well, given that was fairly new technology back then. And they didn't even do all the motion control stuff that Star Wars did. They used a different technology, and not as advanced a one either. So we'd sound like we're overpraising it. I don't think any of us think it's a great film. And
it's not a awful film as well. It's certainly not like the ridiculous film that everybody
I just don't think...
But sorry.
It's bad. I just don't think it was as bad as we're expecting, hence the review sounds more positive. Whereas,
Yeah,
like,
that's relative. We were
whereas
really hard at
Spy-
Spy Who Loved Me because it's rated as a classic, and I don't think it is.
Yeah.
It can be a favourite. I mean, no one's ever like, Becca, why do you like it? I mean, you can pick any Bond film if you genuinely enjoy it. But I don't think objectively it's a particularly good film, whereas we're looking at Moonraker, that's not objectively a good film either, but it's painted as though it's one of the absolute avoids.
Yeah, it's really not.
With Die Another Day, and for some people, Diamonds Are Forever. It's not as bad as either of them, folks.
Die Another Day is awful. It's my worst movie.
I will say now, Diamonds Are Forever and Die Another Day are far weaker films than this.
I'm sure there are some fans of those films out there, so we're sorry about that. But
I still enjoy Die Another Day, but you know.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. It's funny. Well, fun and funny to watch. But yeah, for me, it's the absolute nadir of the series.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll get to that. That's my catchphrase. We'll get to that.
We'll get there.
Well, folks, we're going to talk recordings. We'll do it on the line for the moment because obviously, guys, whenever you're hearing this, it will have been a while.
Yeah.
We don't know when you'll have heard the ones before it because Chris is editing those as we record this.
I will get on it as soon as
at the
possible,
point
guys.
at the point where we recorded this, you've only got up to the Spy Who Loved Me. No, you haven't even got that. Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
Live and Let Die. So we've had a bit of a delay. What I think we're looking to do, and Chris can disagree because he's got the busiest schedule, but I think we're going to record next weekend. I think we're going to do For Your Eyes Only. And then there may be a break, depending on how much editing Chris has still got to do. And also I'll be appearing on the Pick a Flick podcast the following Sunday. So at the point where we record this, we've got 3 in the bank. By next week, we'll have 4 in the bank, and we'll get to them where we can.
Sounds about fair, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, we'll get there in the end.
We'll get there in the end.
It's going to be a slow time for me right now.
It is, but at the point where you hear this, there should be For Your Eyes Only following fairly soon after, because we are going to record that next week. I think we've all got it in our calendars. But at the schedule they come out at is entirely down to like how busy we are, because Chris used to worry about them getting backed up. Them being backed up isn't the problem, actually. If they're backed up, they're backed up, but it's just, don't necessarily expect them to be released anytime soon.
Obviously, yeah, we all do this for a hobby, and we all have day jobs, but we'll get them out as soon as we can, don't worry.
We do, but we got a little bit of time next weekend, and we ought to grab the slot while we can. So we will prepare and record For Your Eyes Only next week, and
it'll be a nice New Year's treat for you to listen to.
By the time you listen to this, that won't be far behind because we'll have recorded it fairly soon after.
We'll probably have View to a Kill by this point.
Yeah, probably.
Well, sorry for the delay, folks. It's nobody's fault, and no one's going to blame Chris for it because he's got an obscenely busy life.
Yes, I do. So
you need an assistant.
If anyone wants to actually do my college work for me, that'd be great.
Or if you can find an assistant whose name's a play on like blowjobs or something like that, so you can feel like he's Bond.
Random task.
Random task. That's the one.
So
if
guys,
people want to find you on social media, where can we find you?
I'm at Cinematronics on Twitter.
I'm at the Pasty Kid 1976.
And I'm at RV Movies. But if you want to come and find us on social media, we are facebook.com/expectustotalk. On Twitter, we are at expectustotalk. We're also on YouTube. So if you type in "Do you expect us to talk" and look for the red gun barrel logo, and you'll see us. And we're also on iTunes and Stitcher.
I do wonder, will we have to change that logo once we move on to other films?
We are.
Yeah, that's what we will do. Yes.
Okay.
As I say, I'm all behind the lazy Microsoft Paint or Photoshopping option. Basically, it must always look. It should basically look like a Bond logo that we've done something really lazy over to make it look like all the westerns or whatever we're doing at that point.
Just have like Clint Eastwood just in the middle. If we could get like.
Yeah, basically, we'll figure it out nearer the time. That will have to change, obviously, but we'll always be a Bond podcast in origin, so we'll still be like, do you expect us to talk? We'll return with, even though that's a Bond trope, we'll still be doing that.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, we're still a Bond podcast, but we will carry on. We are over halfway through the Roger Moore era now, which means we're only about 4 episodes now, actually, because we've got to do Never Say Never Again. Oh. From getting to commentaries and Charlie again.
Very
So
exciting. Looking forward to that. Lots to look
I have a
forward to.
question. I have a question just to end on. Okay, now we're kind of halfway. Well, we are halfway through.
No, we'll be
series.
halfway through Bond next week. I think For Your Eyes Only is the halfway point in terms of films.
Okay. Which Bond film or which episode are you most looking forward to do from this point now?
Die Another Day.
I'd have to say the same, probably.
No, Die Another Day is the obvious one. So putting that one to one side, because that is obvious.
A View to a Kill.
License to Kill.
Yeah. I think that with A View to a Kill and Die Another
Actually,
Day.
GoldenEye for me, I think would be a good one as well.
GoldenEye is going to be an interesting one for me, and I'll be very careful with it because I do like it. I do genuinely, but I'm quite critical of that film, so that could be an interesting episode. But Die Another Day, License to Kill is going to be an interesting one because I think it's going to be most like the Majesties episode, because even though Majesties is a very well regarded film now, we still went about that film like we were trying to convince people it's great, like it wasn't commonly known.
Yeah.
And I think
very underrated.
License to Kill, certainly for myself and Chris, and it'll be interesting to get Becca's almost like first time view on it, even though she knows the film.
Well, let's see. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I love Tim Dalton, and definitely within the series, he's very much underrated as fans.
I just want to talk it through, and I'm looking forward to talking it through. Some of the Brosnan era, not so much. I mean, Tomorrow Never Dies and stuff. I just find them a bit paint by numbers, but I'm very, very looking forward to all of them. Let's be honest, but particularly. I am looking forward to being done with Roger Moore for no other reason than I'm looking forward
Just
to
seen like
it's not I don't like Roger Moore, even though that might be true. It's just time for something different. And the fact is, I have watched several films of his now.
I've never seen Moonraker 4 times.
I'm really looking forward to The Living Daylights because
that's an interesting one.
I've only just thought of this actually. I'm really
Dalton.
looking forward to The Living Daylights because you got the whole Brosnan Dalton casting story.
Very interesting.
And that was...
And least you not forget, Casino Royale.
Yes, that's going to be a great one as well. I'm very much looking forward to that one.
That's going to be another Majesties where we just gush over it for like 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrific film, but as I say, License to Kill, I think there's a lot of people listening who either don't get that film, don't like that film, or don't know that film.
Yeah, and I'd like to go through it with Becca and sort of like, it basically be two of us trying to convince Becca why it's great.
Yeah, there's that.
Just to kind of set the record straight, for me personally,
we know you
talk
don't.
about it now. But yeah, out of the two, I prefer The Living Daylights. I don't know why. It's not that I don't like License to Kill. I do love it.
Yeah,
for some reason, it's just I haven't seen it as many times as I have. I really don't know why that is, and I don't hate it. I don't dislike it.
It's nice to have a fan talk you through it. It really is just to like feel.
I know, I'm very much a fan of it for sure, but for some reason I don't know why.
Yeah, it's alright. We know, and that's what kind of makes this like. I think that's what excites me more. It's like, it's what Dave says. You've got like a bit more of a fresh perspective on it, so you don't hate it, but you don't love it. So when we get to it, it'll be interesting to see what you think.
Yeah,
and then we can
special features and stuff as well.
For example, like when we come to GoldenEye, for example, I mean, I love it. I've got a deep-seated passion for that movie, and I know Dave, you're not a fan so much, so that'll be kind of on the flip side, as it were.
I will pick a lot of fault. I'll warn any listeners now. I will be positive about it, and if it was like now playing, do you recommend? It would still be a strong recommend. I think it's I think it's a very good film, but I think it's a troubled. It's very like The Force Awakens, actually.
Trouble production.
Just in that it's a safety first reintroduction to the series.
Sure.
And I love The Force Awakens, but it's safety first.
It's based in New Hope, but
it is. And
numbers.
GoldenEye is like a little greatest hits package as well. And there's bits of it that don't make sense, and I think it was edited in a hurry as well. But leading up to GoldenEye, you've got the whole interregnum of the series for 6 years. So that and License to Kill, you've got that whole story of why did Bond disappear, why did Dalton disappear. Living Daylights, you've got the whole casting issue around Brosnan and Dalton. And yeah, so that whole era is pretty interesting. You go from A View to a Kill, which I think is hilarious, through to like GoldenEye, and it's all gold. I think they will all be great episodes. And then I think the next really great one's going to be Die Another Day. I'd be surprised if we couldn't produce an episode that wasn't funny and interesting out of that film.
I think
I'm sure we could do something with it. So
I mean, I'm looking forward to Peter Brosnan. I think I think if there's 2 episodes we could actually put together, like review 2 films in one episode, it would probably be Tomorrow Never Dies and The World's Not Enough, because they do kind of like, but
we won't do that.
Yeah, no, we won't.
We'll give the films their due, and the whole point is about revisiting as well. And the thing is, I don't really hate Die Another Day, but sorry, not Die Another Day. I do hate Die Another Day. Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't really hate that film, but
just indifferent.
It's been name checked a lot by me through this series, as I've talked about it as the paint by numbers Bond film.
Well, John Price is a brilliant villain. I do love his
I think he's dreadful. I mean, that's going to be interesting when we get there, because I think he's. I would go as far as to say he's in the bottom 3 in the entire series.
Oh, so hammy, but I love it.
Yeah, and it's a matter of taste.
You can't wait for him
you
to
like
die,
Charles Gray, and I want us to have differences of opinion. It's pointless if we agree on everything.
Yeah,
so there's no problem there. But Die Another Day is really crap. GoldenEye is good, but not as great as some people say. And the 2 in the middle have lots to say about them, because The World Is Not Enough was so nearly a great Bond film. It could have been amazing.
Yeah,
and there were just some really stupid decisions made that sum up the Brosnan era. And it'll be interesting to revisit that. But in the next few weeks, I'm looking forward to next week, because it's the most serious Roger Moore Bond film.
Yes.
The week after that, less so, because I've always been bored by Octopussy. View to a Kill, we watch it and we commentate on it. I'm enjoying both of those. I'm looking forward to the Brosnan era, and I'm looking so the start of the Brosnan era, and I'm definitely looking forward to Dalton. So I think there's loads of good stuff to come.
And
excellent.
on that
note, Bond and Expected to Talk will return with A Few Eyes Only.